All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Andrew Katusin. I'm the program officer for grant making initiatives at the Cleveland Foundation, and I am lucky enough to oversee the operations and grant making of the Lake Geauga Fund. And so you're here today for the technical assistance session for the 2022 Lake Geauga Fund RFP. So you'll see on the screen there in front of you the items that we're going to cover. Some of it my colleague Colleen is going to go over in terms of the technical ways to access the application and complete it. And then the last few items are really talking about the strategies and how we got to those strategies that were identified in the RFP. But before we really dive in, I do want to ensure that everybody is aware that the Lake Geauga Fund is not the only way to partner with the Cleveland Foundation for organizations both in and serving Lake and Geauga County residents. You are also able to come through the sort of the front door or the standard grant making that the Cleveland Foundation does across all of our program areas, which include things from environment, education, health and human services. But this is not the only way to partner with us, and Colleen's going to talk more about that process, but I just wanted to ensure that was clear, that there are multiple ways to work with us at the Cleveland Foundation. And so if you'll go to the next slide, there you will see contact information, and so you'll see my email there as well. And again, if there are any questions about sort of the programmatic or strategy components within the RFP as you're going through it, I am the person to reach out regarding those questions. But now I'm going to go on mute for a little bit and hand the microphone over to my colleague Colleen, who will talk about some of the technical pieces in our grants gateway.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Colleen. I'm part of the grants management team here at the Cleveland Foundation. Jackie, you can move to the next slide. Great. So we'll just dive right in. If your organization is eligible to apply for a grant, the first step is to register your organization through our online portal. Next slide. Eligibility requirements to apply for a grant from the Cleveland Foundation include organizations that serve Cuyahoga, Lake, or Geauga counties that have a 501c3 tax-exempt status from the IRS. Organizations who do not hold a tax-exempt status may choose to partner with a fiscal agent who can complete an application on their behalf. Next slide. To begin your registration, you'll navigate to the Cleveland Foundation website, hover over Grants and Programs, and scroll down to apply for a grant in that drop-down menu. Next slide. On that page, scroll down to the numbers 2 and 3. Pause here. Section 2 gives you the opportunity to request login credentials from the Cleveland Foundation. If you have never applied for a Cleveland Foundation grant before, this is your first stop. Please request these credentials as soon as possible. Once you have received your credentials, scroll down to number 3 to log in and begin the application process. Next slide. Enter your credentials under registered users. Please note that the Cleveland Foundation now uses multi-factor authentication, or MFA, for increased security. MFA verification is conducted via phone only. If you do not have a phone number on file that can receive a text or a call with this code, you will need to complete a brief form to log this information. Next slide. Once you have successfully logged in with your login ID, password, and multi-factor authentication code, you will see your homepage. Before beginning your application, please complete or update the organization profile located on the left-hand side of the screen. Next slide. Once your organization profile is complete, select Apply for a Grant on the left-hand side menu. Next slide. This first section is an overview of completing a general inquiry, which eligible organizations can complete at any time throughout the year. Next slide. If you are applying for a general inquiry rather than for the Lake Geauga Fund, scroll down and click on Apply General Inquiry to begin. After answering a few short questions to verify eligibility and providing a title for your project, you may begin your inquiry. Next slide. Click on each section to complete the inquiry. When you have completed all questions, click Next. Next slide. Click Submit Inquiry to complete your application. You will receive an automated email when your inquiry has been successfully submitted. You also have the option to view or print a PDF for your records. Next slide. In this next section, we will return to applying to the Lake Geauga Fund. In addition to holding a 501c3 tax-exempt status, organizations must serve Lake or Geauga counties. Next slide. If you are applying to the Lake Geauga Fund, return to the Apply for a Grant page and scroll down to Lake Geauga Fund to begin your application. Next slide. The application narrative is organized into sections: contact information for your application, project summary questions, specific project details questions related to your application, and authorizations. The application will lead you through each of these sections. Click Save and Continue to proceed to the next section. Next slide. Once you complete all sections, you will be redirected to the application summary page. A green checkbox will appear next to completed narrative sections. If you see a red exclamation point instead, there is missing information within that section. You can preview a PDF of your application on this page for review. You will see that there is currently no Submit button. Your application is not yet complete. Next slide. Scroll down to the bottom of the application summary page to upload required attachments, including a project budget, your board list, and your current audit report or your most recent financial statement if no audit is available. You may also choose to upload additional attachments, including letters of support from partner institutions and other additional attachments you would like to include in your application. Click on Details next to each attachment in order to upload these documents. Next slide. Once you have completed the application questions and uploaded all required attachments, the Submit button will appear on the application summary page. Your application is not received until you have clicked the Submit button. You will receive an automated email when your application is successfully submitted. Now I'll turn it back over to Andrew to go through strategy overview.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Colleen. I do want to pause. I should have mentioned earlier, but there is a Q&A box, sort of your standard webinar protocol. And I do want to pause just for a couple of moments, not minutes, to see if there are any questions for Colleen, technical questions before we move forward. So I'm just going to pause briefly. All right, seeing none, I will pause throughout this section, but feel free at any time in the Q&A section, put your questions in there, and we will be sure to address them. Because we're making great time right now, so we might be able to give you all some time back if we keep moving at this pace. But again, please, if you have any questions, do put them in the chat or the Q&A. So now I'm going to talk and share with you a bit about the strategies that were identified within the RFP and how we got there. So this is a little bit different than the way the Lake Geauga Fund has handled things in the past. For the past 2 years, in response to COVID, it was very rapid grant making that was not RFP based. But pre-2020, when the pandemic started, the Lake Geauga Fund did issue RFPs on an annual basis for its grant making. However, they were very broad. It was a very broad RFP. And so after reviewing some data from some partners, so at the advisory board spring meeting, we had the Center for Community Solutions come in and do a deep dive into some demographic data on both Lake and Geauga counties, and we were able to look at things like age distribution. We were able to look at things like access to broadband. We were able to look at things like poverty rates to give us a better idea of the needs and sort of the context from a data-driven perspective in both Lake and Geauga counties. In addition to that, Sangfwa Strategies came in and shared with us some data on a 990 analysis that they had done for all of the nonprofits that file 990s in Lake and Geauga counties. And what we were able to learn, again, the advisory board was able to learn at their spring meeting, was what is the average budget size of a nonprofit in Lake and Geauga counties? What is the average staff size? We know that 44% of nonprofits in Lake and Geauga County have 2 or fewer staff. That's one data point that we were able to learn about in our spring meeting. And so when we lined that up with available funds for distribution this year, we came to the decision that based on all of that data, we wanted to be a bit more focused and a bit more targeted in the RFP as it was going to be constructed for 2022. And so that's why and where you see the 2 specific issue areas or populations were identified as part of the 2022 Lake Geauga Fund request for proposals. And that's both seniors and mental health services. And so I will pause there before I dive into discussion about those strategies to see if there are any questions to be answered. All right, next slide. So seniors, we structured this as there is a strategy, and then there are 2 supporting priorities within each of those strategies. So sort of a total of 4 different areas in which we're looking to invest resources. For the umbrella strategy section in the senior area, we've defined it as low-income seniors age 60 and above that reside in Lake and Geauga counties. We didn't put a specific number on what we mean with low income because we know that that varies. If you're looking at household income, if you're looking at seniors on a fixed income, or if you're looking at AMI, and we didn't want to be overly restrictive in that space in terms of defining how your organization should define low income. But we did put an age restriction on it, so 60 and above. And the first sort of sub-strategy or priority that we're looking to invest in is we know that seniors tend to prefer to age at their homes, prefer not to enter residential facilities if at all possible. But we also know that in order to do that, sometimes specific things need to be done or specific services need to be provided so that those seniors can age in place. So the goal here for this section is to support seniors in aging in their homes safely and healthily. And so you'll see some example areas or some example programs that we came up with. This list is by no means the end all be all. There are lots of things not listed in this example that support seniors in successfully aging in place. But some of those examples are like home repair or home modification. So if they need to add, safety grabs in the bathroom is something that's pretty common. If they are unfortunately homebound or have trouble out and about, home delivered meals and groceries is one thing that we could consider. And then just other in-home assistance are again some examples. The last piece, the program capacity building, is that we also recognize within the Lake Geauga Fund that it takes infrastructure to run these programs, not just what it takes to run the program itself, but there's technology, there's support staff, there are other things that are often excluded. And we wanted to make sure that it was clear that we are also open to supporting capacity that it needs to operate programs. Next slide. So here is the other piece of that. And you'll notice that there's purposefully a lot of overlap, and that's okay. We did that on purpose. But the next section is access to supportive services, because we wanted folks to be able to age in place, but we also recognize that isolation and access to basic needs is a unique barrier that may make that not possible as well. And so access to supportive services, the goal here is to make sure that folks stay connected and active within their community to the best of their ability. So basic needs example, food pantry, congregate meals. But we also recognize that, often with a congregate meal model, there is that socialization piece that happens. Sometimes there are also basic medical screens for like blood pressure and glucose. And we wanted to be sure that those activities were supported. We also know that transportation across Northeast Ohio, it's not unique to Lake or Geauga counties, but it's across all of Northeast Ohio, that transportation for seniors is often a barrier. And so we did want to explicitly put in there that transportation is something that would be considered. And again, you'll see that program capacity building. Again, these are just examples. these are not the end all be all, and there are definitely other things not on this list that would be applicable to this program area. I will pause to see if there are any senior specific questions.
Andrew, I'm actually going to go back for a second. We had a question I was trying to dig a little deeper on. The question was, is the data available to access? And they were referring to the 990s for the funding priority.
Yes, that is publicly available data. That is you'll have the 990 data, and it's in an interactive dashboard. It's a website, and there is a we'll make sure that we circulate that link to this group. But it's available for Cuyahoga Lake and Geauga counties. So it was quite a robust deep dive. But yes, it is publicly available. All that to be said. Okay. We can go to the next slide. So mental health. Mental health, we really didn't define, because we know and have continued to see that for all age groups, all brackets, especially as COVID continues to carry on, that mental health services are in high demand. And so obviously, naturally, the first strategy in there is that we just want to ensure that the ecosystem itself, all of those that are providing mental health services, are adequately supported, and the services that are already being provided, but also if there is the opportunity and capacity to support expansion, because we know that there continues to be a big imbalance in supply versus demand. And so some of the examples of the various programs that or the various components that we would be open to supporting are really, this is pretty clinically based, but looking at staffing, looking at training for staffing on best practices, if there are needs, capacity needs around telehealth and technology or office space, and again, sort of that blanket of capacity building. Again, we didn't define this to be for a specific age group. So if you are providing youth mental health services, or if you are providing, mental health services for adults or families, or if there's a specialization involved, this is really broadly defined on purpose, because again, we are continuing to see high demand for such services. Next slide. So this one is a little bit new and a little bit different, right? Promising practices. So what we have continued to learn, both in sort of the core portfolio of health and human services within the foundation's standard grant making, is that, sort of talk therapy or a one-on-one or a clinically based intervention is not necessarily what every individual needs, and is not necessarily the environment in which every individual is going to respond to treatment, right? And so this is the space where we wanted to ensure that it was clear that we were open to supporting things that aren't rooted in that sort of clinical definition of mental health services. It should be rooted in data. It shouldn't just be a shot in the dark, right? But we wanted to ensure that things like peer support groups, animal-assisted therapies, and other things of that nature are clearly supported, because again, not everybody wants a clinically based intervention. I will pause again for questions. Again, please feel free to put any and all questions in the Q&A. We are making great time right now. Okay. Next slide. So as you're thinking about completing the application, here are just tips and tricks, for lack of a better term, but things to think about really as you are completing the application. And that is, there will be quite a few. So could you go back to the previous slide? Thank you. Perfect. So ensuring that there are a variety of questions, and that you're answering the question and it is clear and concise. I know that that's a given, but just to put it up on the screen. Also, the second bullet is that, while you might be offering a mental health program to seniors, we're really looking that we will only accept one application from one organization for one strategy. So even if you provide services and could apply for something in all four, identify the one that you align with most strongly, that is in clear alignment with the strategy as it was defined. Just because we want to make sure that you have your best shot in the most competitive proposal. And so please, again, identify one of those four and identify the one that you align the most tightly with, and apply there. And just to add for some context, the grant range for this RFP is going to be $15,000 to $50,000. So again, when you're thinking about that alignment, that's good context to have. And we will only consider one-year requests, so no multi-year requests at this time. The next part is consider that I will be doing a round of review, but the advisory board will also be doing a round of review, and they are not necessarily mental health experts or folks that serve seniors on a day-to-day basis. So when you're thinking about lingo, when you're thinking about acronyms, please be sure that you are defining those or in avoiding the industry specific lingo, because again, the second round of review, those folks, our advisory board folks, bring great community-based experience and perspective to the board, but are not necessarily experts in these spaces specifically. The next one, partnership is powerful. We've learned very much so during the pandemic that we get much further together. Now, I put this on here because it is a value that the advisory board has lifted up and has talked about quite a bit. However, I do want to note that this partnership, we do not expect or require a formal partnership. So don't see this and think, oh my gosh, I need MOUs, I need contracts, I need these things to sort of validate or formalize my partnership with another organization. That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is it's powerful, and we recognize that sometimes that warm handoff, if you're making a warm referral to another organization, or if you're a large multi-service organization that runs a food program and a mental health program, that ensuring clients are accessing all the services that you offer is also a form of partnership. So please don't get nervous and think that there's work to be done in formalizing partnerships that might be a little bit more relationally based right now. It's totally fine. The next piece, clearly define intended impact. What we're looking to, or what I want to make sure is clear in the applications as you're completing them, is how are you defining success? How do you know that this program is successful? What does that look like? And then also, how are you measuring that? How do you know when you've gotten to whatever you've defined as success for the particular program with which you are applying? The reason that we ask that is it helps us sort of set benchmarks and gauge as we're interacting with grantees throughout the year how things are going. But there's also a final reporting component, right? And so if I understand, if the advisory board understands what success looks like for you and where you're going, and then if possible, what metrics you're already using, we can ensure that we're putting together a final report that gives us what we need, but also isn't necessarily asking you to measure or quantify things that you're not already doing. So if you're able to clearly define that, that will help us sort of all streamline the process throughout the grants management relationship. And then there's a whole nother slide about the last bullet, so you can go to the next slide. And again, just to reiterate, in order to apply, you have to be serving Lake and Geauga counties. Your organization does not have to be based in Lake and Geauga counties, but you have to be able to clearly articulate that you are serving residents of Lake and Geauga counties, specifically with these dollars. These dollars are geographically restricted to Lake and Geauga counties. So we will ask, if you are not based in Cuyahoga County, how do you know that these dollars are only serving those in Lake and Geauga counties? Has to align with the identified strategies. And then again, as Colleen noted earlier, have to have that nonprofit status or a fiscal agent partnership. I will pause to see if there are any questions that are starting to come through.
Yeah, Andrew, we've got two great questions. So the first question, someone mentioned that in times past, the funding was either one-time funds or for new programs. Is this still true?
So these are one-year funds. I'm not specifically going to say that they are one time, but we'll make absolutely no commitment that if you get funded this year, you will get funded again next year. That is not something that in an annual RFP process, which the Lake Geauga Fund will be doing an RFP every year for the time being, there's never a guarantee that you will be funded again next year. I can't even guarantee that these priorities will be the same next year. So really, again, keep that in mind. We are open to funding new programs. It's just we'll really want to see, there's a question that asks about how you're going to leverage foundation dollars to raise other dollars, given that this is RFP based and that we have that question in there. If this is something new, we're definitely going to be paying attention to how you answer that question and what strategies you're either considering or already have in place to seek other funding for the continuation of the program.
Great, thank you, Andrew. We have one more question. Could you speak to the specific reporting requirements on impact and metrics if we are awarded or they are awarded a grant?
Yes, so that's a little bit of a foggy response, right? So we do require like the final report at the end. It's very narrative based, so it's very sort of broad and fits a lot of different expectations, if you will. But that's why that question, if you're able to identify and say, and again, I'm making things up, that, you know, one of the ways that we will know that we're successful is if on X, Y, and Z assessment, our clients see a 3-point increase from pre-test to post-test. If that's how you're defining success, then that is one of the things that I will put in the final report to say, now, how many of those clients achieved that? I do want to sort of put a little asterisk there to say, if the way that you are defining success is that you served 50 people, if that's your goal, I will ask for more. We will ask for more. That's unit of service is not how we necessarily how we define success. So I will look for, we want to serve 50 people and we want those 50 people to achieve X, Y, or Z. Does that answer the question? I'll pause for a second to see if there's any more clarification needed. Okay, next slide. So now I'm going to share with you a bit about our timeline and process. So obviously the application's opened on August 10th. You can go into the portal the way Colleen identified and complete and submit your application. You have until September 12th at 5 p.m. to do so. I tend to be a stickler with deadlines, so if you try to submit at 5:05, it's late and we won't be able to accept it. That's more than a month's time. So September 12th at 5 p.m. is the deadline. After those are submitted, I will get to go through and look at 990s or financial statements, look at board lists, look at all of those documents that Colleen mentioned. I will also get to go through and read every single application that comes through, and I will conduct the first sort of screening, if you will. And that will all happen throughout the month of September. So if I have clarifying questions, you might hear from me as it relates to your application. But then after September, Jack, if you want to go to the next slide. So starting in October is when that second round of review or due diligence will occur, and that will be done by the advisory board members. So once I've sort of done the first screen, a subset will move to the second round, and those advisory board members will then have time in October to read, review, and provide me with comments on the applications. I will then sort of formulate that into a cohesive document. And then in November, at our November or our fall meeting, we will take that meeting to sort of go through and hash out or come to consensus on the organizations that the advisory board and that we believe will receive Lake Geauga funding, and then those that we will unfortunately not be able to support at that time. So that will happen in November, where we will make those decisions. I will have some paperwork to do on the back end after that happens. And my hope is that no later than the beginning of December, grantees will be notified whether they've received funding or not for the Lake Geauga Fund's 2022 RFP process. So that's sort of a high level timeline. And so that you're also aware, again, I mentioned earlier that not all folks are content experts. Well, you'll see in October, that's when folks will be reviewing those applications on their spare time. And we so appreciate their spare time, as they all do have full-time jobs. So any questions about process? Wow, we really flew through that. I was expecting to get grilled. So I think that those are all of the slides. Yes, so I'm just going to sit here for probably 15 seconds to see if any questions come in. If not, if you're like me and you log off and in an hour you have that question, please feel free to reach out. Again, you saw our contact information there at the very beginning. This is being recorded so that we can post it on the Lake Geauga Fund's website. So if you need to go back and reference these slides or need to find, the appropriate contact information or download another copy of the request for proposals, that is on the Lake Geauga Fund's Cleveland Foundation website as well. So seeing none, I will give you back a full hour, and I will take back a full hour of time this afternoon. And again, if anything comes up between now and September 12th at 5 p.m., the deadline, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.